no one can give you any answers. And so you walk in and you're looking, you pick up a product and it would say, maybe it would have ingredients on it, like that was a win. Maybe it would have some contact information, rarely, and if you actually tried contacting, getting someone was not heard of. And so there was just a real lack of information and an even bigger lack of transparency. I would see things like, lab tested, but email us and we'll send it to you. And I'm like, that seems legit.
And this, I should add, is one of the reasons we love dealing with Janice. You walk into Janice's store, and Janice can answer questions. You don't know everything, but you can answer questions. Right. And you carry products that have been proven to be well tested. A few weeks ago, we had the people from Papa and Barkley on. And, I mean, as they detailed the testing, I'm not sure that that my pharmacy bought drugs are as well tested.
Well, I will tell you, there's been a whole evolution that's been going on in the cannabis industry in the state of California. So now everything has gone through testing, rigorous testing, and even like Shannon became a person that got left behind in the cannabis industry because she didn't have the manufacturing license last year to put her product on the shelves that dispensaries needed. So while she stayed underground, we were fighting for a way for her to get that manufacturing license, which, thank goodness, it's now here.
Have it.
So now the product is back here, and
This little preview is very popular. So popular, it just begins to play itself every now and then. The phone has to hear it. It feels amazing.
Siri did that.
That's the voice of
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Phil, thank you very much.
Say hi to Phil.
Say hello to Phil.
The big issue with, going around and basically trying to find all these products is that I was looking for something that was lab tested and not in some backdoor shady way of trying to have to get, test results. And I found what I thought to be the highest standard because they had lab testing and they seemed semi-transparent, but I didn't know that there was a difference in sourcing. And so for me, what I will say now is not saying that, CBD is one molecule, right? There's one molecule CBD that exists, cannabidiol, and it exists in both hemp and it exists in whole flower cannabis.
For those, by the way, who are asking if hemp and cannabis are the same thing.
They're cousins, basically, is the best way to say it.
They have some of the same genetic markers.
Yeah, they're relatives in the cannabis sativa plants. But when it comes to it's not to say that there's no benefit when you don't have it from whole flower. There's a lot of benefit and potential things that can happen. But the way that I explain it is the difference between supplements, and medicine, right? And so one of the biggest issues, and I deal with primarily medical patients. So I deal with patients that have used a lot of products and are on a lot of medications. And when it comes down to consistent medication results, right, and that sort of thing, and having something that they know that they take it and they get that relief they were looking for, or treating a symptom related to a condition beyond your general wellness side of things, right, really targeting, that's where usually the whole flower component comes in, because you need a lot of these other components that are present when it comes from whole flower. And I, as I was going through this process, I'm spending thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars because I'm wondering how much do I have to take to experience the miracle. And I'm meeting with the president of this company and I'm talking, and I'm getting worse. I'm not getting better. My kidneys are now bleeding. I get into another accident, which is the worst flare-up I have. I just had a magnet or a target on my car is all that was happening because I was stopped. I couldn't do anything more right. And I had lesions now all over my face and neck. So now I feel like I have, everything else was invisible until this point. Now I look crazy, and I'm just not getting better. And so I just decided at the end of 2016, I'm going to do some research and figure out why these things aren't working. And I found myself in a rabbit hole that I have not come out of. And I found the endocannabinoid system, and I found Raphael Meshulam, and I found all this information, and I'm like, why is this not on the billboard when you come in? This should be what people are leading with. And I just decided that I was gonna have to make my own medicine. And I decided that I would do some research and figure out how I was gonna make it. And I created Sana Sana Wellness, which is now Sana Sana Formulas. I didn't create it to be a company. I was just making medicine for myself, but because I give it out to everybody and everyone was a resounding, this is working, I made a mental note and I'm like, okay, well maybe I'll make it available. And so what I did, if you want to give me that big box there, the first product that I ever made was called the oil, because I thought I'm going to come out with one product. You just need one product: edible, topical, humans, pets, everything. And that's what I did. Something that you weren't losing cannabinoid content when you were using it topically. And I read one article, and I was interviewed like at the beginning of last year, and they asked me about if I still had the article about microdosing. And to me, it was this prolific moment when I read the words microdosing. And when I looked up the article, literally all it did say was microdosing, and it just got me thinking that I'm really sensitive. So if I could take the smallest dose, and if our receptors, we have these cannabinoid receptors that are located throughout every major organ, throughout your central and peripheral nervous system that respond to cannabinoids like CBD or THC, just like you have opioid receptors. You have opioid receptors, that's a common one we're used to hearing. We have cannabinoid receptors, and they're happy when you get a higher frequency of dosing, so a lower dose at a higher frequency as opposed to big doses here or there. I'm like, that makes sense. So I decided that patient 0, I'm going to do 8 to 10 microdoses a day and just see, 1 milligram doses. And I was seeing things said microdoses as low as 10 milligrams, and I'm like, why 10? Who decided that 10 was the lowest, or who decided that 5? And how do you determine this? And I saw things like milligram per kilogram. And really what that is people extracting information from clinical studies where you have to have some sort of marker. If they don't come up with some baseline, we will never have any results in science. So they have to. That's not the clinical application. That's just the research side. But nobody had bridged that gap to make it so that people could understand.
And we should explain that microdosing is something we talk about a lot on the show. And microdosing is basically you begin with a little and see what happens. And you have to remember, it doesn't work in like 2 minutes. It's going to take maybe a couple of hours. You just watch your body. You're just in touch with yourself. And if you don't, you run into the problem of, oh, it's been 15 minutes. I don't feel anything. I'll take another dose. I still don't feel anything. I think I'll take another dose. And it becomes a lost weekend. When it finally hits you. But you have to be very patient. You have to try it very carefully. You have to see what works. And a lot of things, those wonderful mints over there, I regularly break them into pieces and just use little pieces.
Well, that's where when you have the ideas, the things I would hear is start low and slow. I'm like, great, please elaborate. Or people would talk about ratios, and I'm like, can you explain those to me? And I just started, again, the same way I'd ask a doctor a question, I started asking people in this industry questions. And if I couldn't get answers, I thought there was more to it. And the most simple way I can break it down for you is that everyone has an endocannabinoid system. Everyone's is unique to them, to you, and everyone responds differently regardless of age, sex, weight, or diagnosis. So knowing those facts, why would we start at anything other than a milligram dose? And how do you implement microdosing? That's been a big challenge. I used to be very vague and tell people you might take 1 to 10, but you work up to that. And then I started realizing people maybe wanted more specific guidelines. And that's not doing a service to people. So I've taken it back to basics. It comes down to you being accountable and keeping a dosing journal where you set a guideline to, okay, so if you're just starting, you're gonna take your first dose and not first thing in the morning, because if you have any fear or anxiety about the idea of doing it, you're putting yourself into an unnecessary crisis state. So do it when you're home and you're able to just take your microdose and just be able to see that nothing bad happens. And I call them the I wish I could untake it moments that tend to happen a lot of the times for people. Taking a higher dose.
Oops.
Yep, or eating a little bit of the cookie, having a little more. I mean, edibles are very scary because then it tastes so good. And then you're like, oh, and the next thing you know, you're having an out-of-body experience that you weren't signing up for.
Driving through Hollywood last night, I was struck by a sign for Dr. Norm's award-winning chocolate chip cookies with, of course, THC in them. And it's like, I don't know, I could eat a whole bunch of cookies. Probably not the best of ideas. But your products are THC and CBD, or they're?
Well, I started with focusing on CBD. So first I thought, okay, which side am I supposed to be on here? I
With the
keep
one with the,
looking
with
at
the
it.
little,
Let me
like,
take the
There we go.
menu out of your hand,
So
too.
I was really focused on CBD, and then when I started my research, I found that people were sourcing for something other than just whole flower, and then I'm like, okay, well, I need to make the distinction for my product that it is whole flower. So I say that it's not hemp because for me, it's important for people to know that there is a difference when you're utilizing it when you're a patient like me, right? Like that has a lot of things going on, that chances are you're gonna need something that's a little more precise, that has a larger therapeutic window.
I think we need to be a little more specific, though, to explain this. I don't think we have, actually, that CBD is the non-psychotropic part of cannabis. THC is the psychotropic part of cannabis. So you'll find more and more products at the Antidote, for instance, that offer CBD only, so it's not psychotropic. But there is a world where they're mixed together. They work better when they're in different proportions, 1-3, 3-1, 30-1, et cetera, et cetera. Is that the entourage effect?
Well, I like to say that CBD gets by a little bit better with the help of its friends, which would be the other cannabinoids like THC and terpenes and flavonoids, and there's hundreds of other compounds that we're still learning. Anyone who says that they know everything, just walk away, because we're learning more every single day. There's another receptor that we haven't even hasn't been officially announced, but it's there. This is an amazing system that we're learning. And there's a misconception that no THC is the only way to not have a psychoactive experience. And I say non-psychoactive, and you guys all received the guide right here. So one of the things that we did in the relaunch, big name change, Sana Wellness to Formulas, and we have a little symbol key. So we have this really cool iconography that speaks to everybody. It's not indica, sativa, or hybrid, or ratios, because those are not the most universal things for anyone to understand. And the more that comes out in science, the more we know that it's important to know the strain, not necessarily if it's an indica. If you give, I use my grandma as an example all the time, if you give her morphine, you might as well have given her speed. The same thing can happen in cannabis, where one might affect somebody a certain way, just because indica typically might cause a more sedating thing for people. A lot of other people, it might not. So there's more to it. That was scratching the surface. That indica, sativa, and hybrid happened before the endocannabinoid system. So you have to remember, before we knew that there was a system that exists, they were going off of those terms. Now we know that there's so much more to each single strain. So there's terpenes, which are the essential oil compound that are found in black pepper and pine trees, and they're essential oils, aromatherapy, right? Exactly. Lemon. And they're recognized as safe, and they are they are recognized for their therapeutic benefits, and they act as like a fingerprint for marijuana strains. And they provide a genetic fingerprint, but they also give you a roadmap to specific therapeutic benefits. So
you are a wealth of information. I want to leave some room for questions here, but hold on to questions. I would like to bring up Alan Siskind, if you don't mind.